Hey guys, good morning. It's Thursday, and today I thought we would, make a cherry pie, but not just any cherry pie. This cherry pie has a Crust topping on it, like a Streusel topping on it, which I think is going to knock our socks off. Yeah, I've done cherry pie before with a lattice top, and that was fun. Cherry pie is our favorite. We make cherry pies all the time. They can be a bit pricey to make depending on the time of year and season, but we avoid some of that by using canned cherries. We don't use fresh cherries. Not into that much work. There's not a lot of fresh cherries can be very inconsistent in flavor, tartness, sweetness, depending on where you're headed. But there's a multitude of different ways to make a cherry pie. And as a matter of fact, next week we are going to can some cherries. That way we can get a good, consistent cherry that I don't have to buy from the grocery store via a can. And there are some nuances to this I think you could do, but we've always just done them with just a regular can of cherries. They're the tart cherries, in water. Which is how we're going to can our cherries when we can them next week. It's just going to be cherries and water, which is exactly what this is. So, that being said, if you're new to my channel, welcome. Glad you came. Hope you get something out of me. A lot of this, at any rate. If you're returning, thank you. You're a glutton for punishment, but I love you all the same. And I appreciate you guys. Never take you for granted. If you would be so kind as to subscribe, I believe it's over here. Might be over here, but I'm pretty sure it's over here. Right next to that is the notification bell, so you know when my videos come out. They come out every Wednesday and Thursday, almost every week. I may miss a day here or there. Family, full-time job, things happen, but I haven't missed a day in quite a while. I enjoy spending time with you guys, and I try to never miss that. Thumbs up, thumbs down are important. The subscribing and the thumbs up, thumbs down both help put us in the algorithm for YouTube, which grows our community. And we're all about food and being a good neighbor. Those are two, I think, essential things. Food, a must. Getting along with everybody, it's pretty helpful too. It doesn't mean you have to talk to everybody every day, but it's good if you can, get to know your people and be there for them and they'll be there for you. So, thumbs up, thumbs down, just as important. Comments, always welcomed. Always welcomed. The only thing I ask is keep them civil. It's okay to disagree. Just be civil about it. Be respectful. Don't be a jerk. So think before you type. All right. So that being said, why don't we get down here to the countertop and we'll look and see how to make. We're going to start with the pie filling, and then we're going to make the crust, and then we'll make the streusel topping and put her in the oven. So let me get you down here and we'll get started. This could be a long process. All right, hold on for me 1 second. Okay, we're down here at the countertop, and the cherry pie it's not hard to make. It can be time consuming with the waiting game, because after we make the filling, we got to let it cool. That takes a while. We make the crust. We set it in the fridge. That takes about 45 minutes to an hour to set in the fridge. And then we bring it all together for one glorious meeting and throw it in the oven, and then we're about ready to eat. So anyhow, that being said, let's get started. As always, I have a recipe, ingredients list, although this particular pie, I don't have a recipe written down for. I'm actually taking it from 3 different recipes. But we're going to start with the filling first, because that takes forever to cool. And you can make this and let it cool to room temperature and then stick it in the fridge for the next day if you want to make it ahead of time. Same with the crust. So the first thing we're going to start off with is 3 cans, and they're the 14.5, 15-ounce cans of tart cherries and water. All right, we're going to put that in there.
Motion detected at the front door.
Got that. Then the next thing we're going to add to this is 1 1/4 cup, 280 grams of granulated sugar, just plain old white sugar like you'd put in your coffee. Just like such. Then we're going to add 4 tablespoons, 43 grams of cornstarch, and 1/8 of a teaspoon, about a pinch, or a half a gram of salt. And we're going to put that in there. And as always, I give you your measurements in cups, tablespoons, teaspoons, and grams, because I want you to be able to be as precise as possible when baking. And it makes it easier for anybody to be able to bake a pie. Depending on where you're at in the world, you may not use cups, tablespoons, teaspoons. You may just use grams. And then the last thing we're going to add to this is, out of those canned cherries, I reserved some of the juice that they were in, essentially the water with cherry juice in it. And I've got 1 1/3 cups of cherry juice, and I did not measure it to see what the milliliters were on that, or grams, but I will put it down in the description and let you know. So we're going to pour that on there, and then we're just going to give this a good mix, right? Now, the next thing we got to do is, really, making the fillings easy, because that's everything, is we're going to turn our range on, and we're going to bring this up to a boil and let it, a slow boil, not a like major eruption of a volcano, but a slow, steady boil, and this will start to thicken and turn clear. As it sits right now, see how it looks really cloudy? That'll all clear up. That is the cornstarch in there, and as cornstarch heats up, it will go clear. So when I come back, this will be thickened. I'll show you what it looks like. We'll set it aside to cool and move on to the next step. All right, be back in just one moment. Okay, so we're not quite there yet, but I wanted to show you something, and hopefully you can see it. But you'll see as it warms up and starts to go clear, you may see some like clear spots or pieces of gel, and that's okay. The clear spots are perfectly normal, and what that is it's the cornstarch starting to thicken up. So that way our cherries are, our filling is starting to turn into filling and not just water, cornstarch, sugar, and cherries. Alright, so let me get this finished, and we'll take a look at it and move on to the next. Okay, so our filling is good. See how we're nice and clear now? It's not opaque anymore, or pink. It's just got a nice clear look to it. And another sign to look for, A, it's thicker. It's a lot thicker. But see how it's bubbling? That's good. That means we're up to temperature. So, that being said, now we'll just turn off our heat, right? And we're just going to take this off the burner, and we're just going to let it sit and cool. All right, now let me move the camera real quick. We can talk some more. Okay, so we're letting that cool. Now, variations you can do to this. Let's say that you can't find tart cherries, or you can find sweet cherries. You can use those. You'll want to back the sugar off about half, and then do exactly what we did, and then taste it to see if it's sweet enough for you. And then you can just add a little bit at a time, a teaspoon, tablespoon at a time, until it gets the consistency you want. Let's say you're using frozen cherries. Make sure they're completely thawed first. Add about half the liquid in, instead of using 1 1/3 cups of the cherry juice that came in the can, you would use half of that, about 2/3 to 3/4 a cup. Put it in there, because those cherries, even though they're thawed, they still have juice in them, so they're going to release that juice, and that way you don't overdo it on the liquid. While that's cooling, and that's going to take maybe about an hour or so, way you can make it cool faster, if you've got a small cookie sheet, or even a 9x13 pan, and you can pour it in there and spread it out, that'll help it cool faster. But if all you got is the pot you cooked it in, that's fine. Don't want to dirty another dish. Just let it sit, because remember, we're about to make our dough, and that's going to have to sit in the fridge for an hour also. So, let me get you back down to the counter here, and we will start making our dough. Alright? Hold on for me 1 second. Okay, so we're back here to the counter, not the stove top, and we're going to make our crust. Now, Making a crust, I highly recommend using a scale. You don't have to, but it makes life a whole lot easier. All right, so to make our crust, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 easy ingredients. First thing we're going to start with is 2.5 cups, 300 grams of flour, and it's just regular all-purpose flour, that you would buy for making everything. And I'm going to use a food processor. You can most certainly do this by hand. I just find it's easier for me. It's what I'm used to use a food processor. To this, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of salt. All right, I'm using kosher salt. If you're using kosher salt, make sure you grind it up a little bit first. That way, you don't end up with chunks of salt in your dough. Inevitably, every time before I used to crush mine, somebody, usually Chris, my wife, if you don't know, would end up with a bite of salt every time. So I just started crushing it up. Kosher salt comes coarse. To that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons, 30 grams of just regular granulated sugar. Now, this crust is kind of an all-purpose butter crust, so if you're making a savory dish and you don't want the sweetness in the crust, leave the sugar out. Or you can put a little more sugar in if you want more sugar. And then what we're going to do is we'll grab our lid, and we're just going to pulse this real quick to get the dry goods mixed up. Alright, dry goods are mixed. Next thing we're going to add to this is 1 cup, 226 grams of unsalted butter. Now, you want it cold. This is one of those times in baking when you don't want it at room temperature. You want this as cold as possible. I pulled it out of the fridge. I cut it up into little 1/2-inch cubes pretty much, but you want small cubes. And then I stuck it in the freezer until I was ready to use it. About 10-15 minutes. That way it's as cold as it can possibly get. I have also learned that fat content is everything. I could never understand why some butters were expensive, some butters were cheap. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. The more expensive butters either have a higher fat content, right above 80% fat, and they're usually imported. European, English butters usually have a higher fat content, and the quality of the butter is just a little better all the way around because of what they feed their cows, their dairy cows. Where like your cheaper butters, your store brand butters pretty much, they don't have 80% fat content, and the cows are usually fed grain versus like a grass or things like that. So that counts towards flavor, and I just learned that a while ago. So I'm using a good quality butter. It's 83% fat, and it's ice cold, chopped into cubes, about a 1/2 inch, and it's 223 grams, 1 cup. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pulse this until it becomes a fine crumb like cornmeal. All right? Okay, we pulsed it around, and all we were looking to do is chop up that butter. Now, you don't want to work it too much. Dough likes to be cold, hands down. And if you've got some small chunks in there, but see how it's got a cornmeal-y look, it's not quite as powdery as it was. And like I said, if you've got small chunks in there, that's okay. Now watch putting your fingers in your food processor. That blade will be very, very sharp. So we're good there. May get the counter wiped off here a little bit. My food processor, for all its goodness, because this thing is a beast, has a tendency to shoot flour everywhere when I make pie crust. But it's okay. Sacrifices must be made, I suppose. All right, so to this, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of ice water. Now, I've got an ice cube in there. It wants to be cold. Remember, dough likes to be cold. It does not like to be warm. It melts butter. It does funny things to the flour. It coats the flour with the butter. And all of a sudden, you don't have a dough, you have a mess. So, I'm going to start off. I'm going to turn this on low. And I'm going to put a 1/4 cup of water in here. Okay, so I've got my 1/4 cup of water in there. And then to this, only because I know my recipe, well enough because I've made it well enough. And this is a single crust. If you wanted to do a double crust, I have a recipe for that. We may actually revisit that. So I'm going to turn this back on low, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, in my case, 3 teaspoons of water to this while it's running, and then we'll talk about why. Okay, so we got that in there. Now, next thing we're going to do is, don't worry, we're still going to talk about why, because the water is kind of important, because there's not an exact measurement for the water, where everything else has an exact measurement. Let me get my scale out of the way, teaspoon out of the way. Then we're going to take our dough off. Now, if you can, take your blade out now, but if you can't, that's okay. I'll show you what I do. It just makes it easier for me at any rate. So all I do is I dump my dough on the counter, and you'll see it's still powdery. That you're like, Brian, that's not even going to hold together. It will, trust me. So get my blade out of there, that way I don't cut myself. Well, I don't know if you can see it, but there's even a little bit of flour falling out from the underside of that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to not knead it, but knead it. And we're going to make a dough ball, right? Just like such. Now, if you have what's called hot hands, which I do, and I should be wearing gloves, but you want to try to insulate your hands or work as quickly and carefully as possible. All right, so we got this as good as we want to get it. Now, it's okay that there's crumbs in there, and I'll tell you why. Because we're going to put this in the fridge so the glutens can settle down a little. Right now, the glutens in this dough are just going nuts. We have worked them out like they just did a 30-minute power workout. So we need to let them rest. Well, what's going to happen in that time also is the flour will evenly suck up the water, right? So we're going to take some saran wrap, plastic wrap, however you want to call it. I say satin wrap because that's what I grew up calling it, but that's actually a name brand. It's kind of like when you need a Band-Aid. Band-Aid is a brand. It's not actually what they are. So we're going to take this, and I'll move it over so you can see it a little better, and we're just going to form it into a circle, or a disc, as it's called in the baking world, and about 6.5 inches around. This will make one big crust. And I can tell you my 2 pie crust recipe, all you would add is 50 more grams of flour to this, and you would be having a lower shell and an upper shell to make like lattice for your cherry pie, or if you're making an apple pie. That's the only difference. All right, so we got that in there. We're going to wrap it up just like such. And then I'm going to flip it over real quick so I can look and make sure there's no cracks on the bottom. So when it comes to dough, things I've learned. Whatever shape you form it into while it's at this stage is pretty much what it's going to want to form into when we go to roll it out. So you always want to have a disc. Now mine's not perfectly round because I'm not perfect and I'm not perfectly round. Another thing I learned is that if you have cracks in it now, you will have cracks in it when you go to roll it out, which makes your job a little harder. Let's stir this cherry filling real quick, get the skim coat off the top of it. Not that it's going to hurt anything, it's just bugging me. But now all we got to do is just put this in the fridge for an hour to let it settle down. You want an hour minimum. You can leave it up to overnight. And if you're not going to say, like, I know in my case, a lot of times, because of pies come and go in waves, like I may go a month and a half and sell 5-6 pies a week, and then it switches over to cakes, and then to cookies, and then back to pies or whatever. And so I'll make up pie crust for 10 to 15 pies at a time, and put them in my freezer where they'll be good for, a month or two. You just have to wrap them really well. We would put 2 things of cellophane around here, make sure it's very tight before we put it in the freezer. But if you're going to use it and put it in the fridge, it's good for a day or so. So you can make that in advance. You can make your cherry filling in advance. And then that way all you got to do is put it together and throw your crumb topping on there. So if you're making another pie of some sort, make 2 crusts, put one in the freezer. That way you have it. So with the water thing real quick, I start with a 1/4 cup, and then I personally, with the flour I use, I add 3 tablespoons. Every flour manufacturer does their flour a little different. And because of that, some may require more water, some may require less water. I have just found a 1/4 cup is a good place to start with hydrating it all. And you'll know what you're looking for is you should be able to pinch some of it out of your dough while it's still loose, squeeze it together, and it'll hold. All right, it'll form dough. If it's there, stop. Don't add any more water. I have learned through all the pie crusts I've made that 1/4 cup and 3 teaspoons, and it is teaspoons, not tablespoons, 3 teaspoons of water get me where I need to be for both my crusts, whether I'm doing a double crust or a single crust. That way we're good. And like I said, make sure your butter is ice cold and your water is ice cold. If you don't have an ice machine or you don't have ice cube trays, make a 1/2 cup of water in a measuring cup, because I always use a 1/2, that way I have enough. Put it in your freezer for about 20 minutes. It'll be ice cold and it won't freeze. So I'm going to get this in the fridge. We're going to let that cool down. When I come back, we'll make our crumb topping, roll the pie shell out, get our cherry pie filling in there, and get it baked, and hopefully have a piece. All right, I'll see you here in just a second. Okay, so it's been about an hour, and give or take. Our pie filling's cool. Our dough has rested. So next thing we need to do is roll out our dough and get it into the pie pan, and then we'll put it back in the fridge and let it rest while we make our crisp topping. And then we can put it all together and talk about what to do with the oven. All right, so I'm gonna get you down here to the counter, and we'll talk about rolling out pie dough. All right, hold on for me 1 second. All right, so we're down here on the counter. Now I use a mat. It is a silicone mat. It serves several purposes. I don't have to fuss with the mess on the counter, and it's just easier to clean up. Plus, this particular one, I don't know if you can see it or not because of all the flour, has circles on it that give me dimensions. So we're using a 9-inch pie pan right here, and so we're going to want to roll this out. I roll mine out about 12 inches, which is the last circle on this particular one, and especially at this time, because this pan here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's fairly deep. I mean, it's, 1/2 knuckle, couple inches maybe, well, at least 1.5 inches. So it's a deeper pie pan, and I can get away with that because I'm using just this entire crust for the pan. I'm going to roll this out to about 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick when I do that. Now, when you roll out pie dough, you want to make sure that it's soft, okay? So we pulled it out of the fridge and we let it sit here for about 5-10 minutes until I could make fingerprints in it. That way I know it's, at least soft enough to get started. And I'm going to take some flour and I'm going to put it on top. Now, you can use a fair amount of flour, but don't, go crazy with it or you'll dry your dough out. There is no right or wrong answer because I don't know how much water you put in your pie crust, but I give it a good liberal sprinkling at any rate. And then I just take my rolling pin. This one here happens to have these really cool things on the end that I can take off and on, and they give me at least a size. You don't have to have that. The important thing is you get it out to that 12-inch mark or whatever size pan you're using. In this case, 9-inch, 12-inch, because it's a little deeper. Now, when I roll, I don't push into it real hard, and I start in the center, and I work my way out. I go back and forth, okay? And after a few back and forths, I turn my dough about 1/4 turn and keep going. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not. Here, I'll bring it up to you to show you. See the cracks in the edges? That's okay. Sometimes that can just mean that your dough's not warmed up enough yet. Or when we rolled it up, so to speak, first made that disc, there were cracks there and I didn't catch them, which is probably the case because this dough's rolling out good. Or, I mean, it could be it's dry. I mean, there's a million reasons for it, but chances are good. It's just still a little cold for you, or you just didn't get it quite closed up in the process. Now, when you're rolling, like I said, you go from the center back and forth, all right? But what you don't want to do is put a lot of pressure on the end. If you do that, you'll end up with a really thin here, really thick in the center. So I prefer to, kind of work it from the center out. There are people who will take their pie pin or their rolling pin, and they'll do like a clockwise motion on it like that. It just really depends on you. So what do I do with those cracks and fissures? Well, what I do is I go through and just form it back in like such. All right, we got it rolled out. And I went way bigger than 12 inches. I took my ends off to let me go with it. The key to it, you just don't want to go much thinner than 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch is pretty much what most recipes, as far as temperature and length of time in the oven, are looking at when it comes to pies. So you want to, the most important part is to make sure your crust is even. You don't want any high spots or low spots. And, and you may not have a rolling pin that has the ends on it. That's okay. You don't really need one. We saw that on another YouTuber's channel and was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And don't be afraid to handle your dough either. You want to be able to, treat it like a pie. If your dough is fragile, it's okay. It's all part of the learning process. But, you should have a good, solid dough that's workable and pliable. Now, that being said, you want your dough to stay cold. So if at any point your dough starts to get unworkable, starts sticking to your rolling pin, or, is hard to work with, throw it back in the fridge. That's the other thing about this pad that makes it nice. I can literally just pick that up and put it in the fridge. I don't even have to touch the dough. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pie pan in there. And I'm just going to take my dough and I'm going to roll it onto my rolling pin. Just like such. Bring my pan underneath it. And we'll pick it up and lay it down. Just like that. And then we'll shimmy it around to make it as even as possible. And then we're just going to press our dough down into our pie pan. Now, you don't want to stretch your dough. Like, you don't want to sit here and pull on it. The reason for that is your dough, if you stretch it like that, it will snap back and not be very nice to you. It'll shrink. When you go to bake it, it'll shrink. That's just the nature of dough. It's, the glutens in it like to snap things back. If you ever use like a pre-made pizza crust, or you're making bread and you go and roll it out and it right back, that's why. The glutens are very active, they're kind of angry, and they need to relax. So you don't want to stretch it, because what happens is those glutens, they heat up and they're all angry, they'll bring it right back. And all of a sudden you got a pie that's smaller than your pan. Alright, so I want to leave about 3/4 inch hanging off the side of this. Not much more than that. And let me grab my scissors real quick. And all I'm going to do to do this, let's say I would have made this pie, a little thinner than I have. I'm right between 1/8 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. We wanted a thicker crust. Not everybody likes a thick crust. I don't know why you wouldn't. Crust, if done right, is just as good as the filling that's in the pie. It's not just a vessel for the, crust to sit in, or for the filling to sit in. It's an intricate part of it, I think. And I don't mean to brag. Yeah, I do, because I've worked very hard to get a good pie crust, but I have had at times I've not had anybody ever say, Brian, that pie crust tastes horrible. Yeah, now I did have one customer say that he thought the the crust ring, was a bit thick for his liking, but he liked the crust all the same. So I know it's a good crust, it's a good workable recipe. Okay, so we've got it trimmed up about half, 3/4 inch all the way around. Now we're just going to take it and see if I can get you. And we're just going to fold it under so it sits on the rim of your pie pan. I'll bring it up to you as soon as I get these folded so you can see. Okay, there we are. But see how it's sitting on the pie ring? It's probably good that I'm showing you, that way I can kind of see. Not that it matters a whole lot, but see how it's sitting on the ring and not below it? That ring that's there for a reason. It actually serves a functional purpose, and that is to give your dough something to hold on to as it bakes, and it won't shrink. Now, I'm going to do a fancy, not horribly fancy, but fancy top, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knuckles, put them like this on the back side of the dough, and I'm going to take my finger and go in between my knuckles, and I don't know what this is called exactly. I don't know the technical term for it. But it's like fluting or giving it a nice decorative look. And it also brings your crust up just a little higher so you can have it hold a little more. All right, see, there we are. We got our fluted, nice and wavy, ready to go. So what am I going to do next? Well, the next step for this pie crust, I know, this is a forever process. I'm going to put it back in the fridge, just for like 5-10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get my oven preheated to 425, I do believe, and get this mess cleaned up. Now we're going to make our crisp topping, and we'll put the pie all together, get her in the oven, and talk about how long to cook it for, or bake it for. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, so got the mess cleaned up. Pie shell's in the fridge. I'm going to put down my drink here real quick. And I think we're ready to make a crisp topping. But the first thing we want to do is we want to turn our oven on. We're going to set it on 425. Just like such. Get it going. Make sure there's nothing in there. I don't know about your parents growing up or you, but I keep an ungodly amount of stuff in my stove. Mostly pans. Pie pans, cookie sheets, things like that. So anyhow, let me get you down here. We'll make a crisp topping real quick, and we'll assemble a pie. All right, hold on one second. Okay, down here at the counter, as always. I say okay an awful lot. This crisp topping is really easy. It's versatile. I actually use this for my Dutch apple pie, my pear pie, and now we're going to use it for cherry pie. You can also use it for a peach pie. Anything you want a crisp topping on, this is a great one for it. It's very versatile. You can put almost anything in it to make it your own, as far as spices go, or depending on the time of year. So we're going to start this with 3/4 cup, 90 grams of flour. All right, in here. And like I said earlier, I give you everything cups, teaspoons, tablespoons, and grams. That way anybody can make it. And you should be using grams and a scale. Either way, I preach a scale constantly when it comes to baking. Cooking, not so much. So we got our 90 grams of flour in here, 3/4 cup. And to this, like I said, I'm using a food processor. You don't necessarily have to use a food processor, but it does make it a little easier. To this, I am going to add a 1/2 cup, 100 grams of brown sugar. And that would be packed brown sugar if you're not using a scale. That way, that's in there. Just go a little on the side there, get that up. And before you ask or comment, complain, yes, my countertop is clean. I just wiped it off from the dough. And then we are going to add 1 cup or 100 gram of rolled oats, or old-fashioned oats, as they're also called. You can also use quick oats, like the instant oatmeal oats. They come in the whatever brand you buy, but Quaker instant oats. we're going to add those in there. And then the last thing, next we're going to add 1 cup or 110 grams of pecans. You know, pieces, whole. Now, if you were making this without a food processor or something of that sort, you would definitely want to crush those up. That way they're in pieces, because we're going to process this until our pecans are in grain-sized pieces. And then we're just simply going to add a half a teaspoon of cinnamon at 1 gram and a half a teaspoon of salt at 2 grams to it. Just like such. And then we'll grab our lid here that I never took out of the sink from washing. Well, hello there. Put it on like such. And then we're just going to run this until our pecans are... hold on, I wrote it down because I can never remember anything. So the pecans are about a barley size, like a wheat size pieces, about 25-35 seconds on high. All right. We got that ran. Let me show you real quick what I was talking about with the barley size pieces. Yeah, I mean, we're not looking for a complete powder, but see how it's, you know, granules, you know, almost like a grain. And that's what we're looking for there. I mean, it's okay if you have bigger chunks in there, smaller chunks in there. That's not a big deal. Now, to this now, I'm going to add a half a cup, 1 stick, 113 grams of butter, and I have it softened. I mean, it's been sitting out for about 20 minutes. It's not frozen. You know, it's borderline room temperature. And we're going to put that in there, because what we're going to do is we're just going to pulse this until it's combined with everything. Not till it's, you know, turned into a paste, but just combined. That way, because remember, we're making a Crust topping, and what happens with the Crust topping is, as it's in the oven, the butter melts, it adheres everything together on the top, and kind of makes a shell that covers the filling. So, yeah, but we'll leave holes in it, and we're going to put it on real sloppy. It'll be awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and pulse this, yeah, maybe about 6-7 times until it's all incorporated. All right, yep, we're incorporated. I don't see any giant chunks of butter in there. Nothing's melted or globbed up, ready to go. All right, that's our Crust topping. So now all we have to do is assemble our pie. So let me get this cleaned up real quick, and then we'll do some assembly. Okay, got everything moved to the side there, and got our main 3 components out. Pie crust. One thing I didn't mention with the pie crust, if you're going to put it back in the fridge like we have been doing, if it's going to be longer than about 10 minutes in the fridge, put some saran wrap over it, some plastic wrap over it, cling wrap, whatever you like to call it, and that way it doesn't dry out, because you don't want your pie filling to dry out. All right, so we got our pie filling sitting there, or our pie crust is there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to pour all this lovely cherry filling in, just like such. This is the quick part. Got that in there. Make sure we're good and even, as we are. Now, be right back. I'm going to grab a plastic glove so I can scoop in there and get the pie. Okay, got my glove. We're good to go. I'm back. Missed you very much. Hope you missed me. And we're just going to take some of our crumble here, our crisp, our streusel topping, however you want to call it. Now, like I was saying with this topping, there are some things you can do different with it. So if it's the holiday season, you could add some cardamom and cloves to this, and some nutmeg, and powdered nutmeg and powdered cardamom and powdered clove to it to give it that hot, I call it Christmas taste. But it's really just, any kind of holiday. And, or you can leave all that out. You could add more cinnamon to it. You could add less cinnamon. I mean, there's just, any kind of spice you like in a cake or a Crust topping, bam, put it in there. All right, so we got our Crust topping on there. Just waiting for that oven to finish warming up. That's okay, because we can talk about what we're going to do with this while it's warming up. So, got our Crust topping on there. There is our finished uncooked product. I think it looks amazing. I think it's going to taste amazing. I hope it does. So it looks good is one thing. We'll smell it and it'll smell good, but then taste is everything. So let's talk about what we're going to do with this. We got our oven preheating at 425, right? We're going to let it bake at 425 on a cookie sheet. Okay, that's important because fruit pies like to bubble. That's what you're looking for to make sure it's done. So we're going to put this on a cookie sheet. We're going to bake it at 425 for 20 minutes. When that 20 minutes is up, we're going to kick the oven down to 375. And I'm going to put this pie ring on there. If you don't have a pie ring, you can use aluminum foil to make a ring. And we're going to put it around the edge. That way the crust does not burn. We don't want it to burn. And at 375, we're going to bake this for about 30 to 40 minutes. Sorry, I had to look. So I don't, when you bake a lot, you don't remember all the times for every pie or cake you make. Which is why we write it down. It's why recipes were created. So, we're going to bake this at 375 for 30 to 40 minutes. You don't want to just put it in there and walk away for 30 to 40 minutes. You don't even want to walk away when you're doing the 20 minutes at 425. You want to pay attention to that Crust topping. If it starts to go really dark on you or starts to burn at the tips, the high points, put a piece of aluminum foil over it. That'll keep it from burning while it cooks. Because the last thing you want to do is put all this work and effort into a pie to have the topping burn. Then, once it's done, we're going to check for a couple things. Or once the timer goes off at my 30 to 40 minute mark, I am going to look at the pie filling. It should be bubbling in the spots where there aren't any crumb, and some spots it'll just bubble through the crumb. And I'm going to take its temperature. Make sure it's running at about 212 degrees. So we got two things we can look for: bubbling and 212 degrees. Pie ring when 375 starts, or sooner if you need to. If your crust starts to look like it's getting a little too dark too quick, boom, there it is. And then foil if my crumb starts to burn. So when I come back, we'll get this out of the oven and we'll take a look at it and talk about how long we gotta let it cool before we can have a piece. All right, I'll see you here in just a second. So we let it bake. It actually took about 45 minutes because I used a deeper pan, deeper pie pan. So it took a little longer to hit that 212 degree mark. But let's take a look and see where we're at. There we are, and I can bring it up to you. Just give me 1 second there. It's still blazing hot. I literally just took it out of the oven and temped it, and we were at 213 degrees, which means we hit our sweet spot. But there we are, nice and done, looking pretty. Can't hate on it. So what do we do now? I know cherry pies are a lot of work. Fruit pies can be a lot of work, but they are so well worth it in the end. So now we just have to let it cool. 3 to 4 hours minimum on a rack, on a wire rack. And then, but best practice really is overnight. So, if this is not a pie or a cake that you'd want to make to take to a party that evening, it's something you want to let sit, but it is well worth the effort. I just know it's going to be. Now, I've never done one with a Crust topping before, but I've made plenty of cherry pies over the last few years, and this recipe is to die for, cherry filling wise and crust wise. So, that being said, I'm going to let this sit, and probably till maybe tomorrow, either way, but it's going to sit for a few hours at any rate. And when I come back, we'll give it a taste and see how it goes. Alright, I'll see you here in a second. Alright guys, so next day, we'll let the cherry pie sit all night. Most of the day, all night, and most of the day today. So, it's all or nothing. Now, I've not made one quite this deep before. So we'll see how it holds together. I mean, that's a pretty deep pie. I don't care what you said. So, but I got faith in it. Yeah. Even though I've made all three of these parts before, the crumb, the dough and the filling. Not quite in this combination. So, anyhow, let me get you down here. We'll cut a piece out and see how it turned out. All right, hold on for me. All right, we are down here. Plate, tools to eat and pull it out with, knife to cut with. This bad boy has been in the fridge for a minute. It's cold and firm. Oh. All right. Yeah, it's been a long couple days, but the best part of it was probably making this pie. Let's go ahead and get this piece out of here. Oh, that crust is so unbelievably thick. Which is good. I mean, if you like crust, you know, this is definitely the way to go. Which I don't know many people that don't like a good crust. Nope, I left part of the crust in the bottom. I didn't use this pan very often, just because it's deep. Yep. My scoop wasn't big enough to scoop out the bottom. That's all right. We'll put it on the side. Tell you what we're going to do, because I can see it inside here. And it looks amazing. I will show you what it looks like in the pan. So that way you can see, I mean, it's holding together good. I mean, that it is inside the pan there. That's got that nice thick crust layer, crisp layer on it, and all that. I am very happy with this. I'm sorry that the main piece fell apart on me, so I don't have much to show you as far as the piece goes, unless I cut another piece, which I may do. Yeah. So if I come back at the end of this video to show you another piece, that'll be why. But that being said, we are going to try this bad boy all the same. Because busted up crust or not, I'm going to try it. Now, I would recommend, if you do refrigerate yours, which, I mean, you don't have to. This is considered a counter pie. It can sit on a counter. It'll last longer if you put it in the fridge as far as life expectancy goes. But it'll last a couple, 2-3 days on your counter. But if you do keep it in your fridge, when you pull it out, let it warm up to room temperature. Mmm. Mmm. That, my friend, is borderline, dare I say, perfection, at least in my mind. Oh, that crisp topping is amazing on that, with that cherry filling and this pie crust. And you may have your own pie crust recipe, but this pie crust recipe is hands down one of the best ones ever. It's pretty much the same one I make. And, you know, it's very close to mine. The only difference being it doesn't have quite as much flour in it because it's a single pie crust. But the taste is phenomenal. That cherry filling, of course, is to just die for. It is one of the best recipes I've ever come across and tweaked. And of course, the crisp, you can't go wrong with the crisp. The pecans in it, amazing. That pie, fantastic. Try this recipe. This is not a hard pie to make. It does take a little bit of time. There's a lot of kind of hurry up and wait. You know, because you gotta let that crust sit in the fridge for an hour to rest. You gotta let the filling cool down. But once you get past those two steps, bam, you're in the run. You're baking it, you got it out, and you're good to go. So try this. Let me know what you think. All right, because I don't think you'll be disappointed. You don't have to use a major deep dish pan like this. And if you roll your crust out and you've got a lot left over, whatever dough you have left over, put in your freezer. Add it to another one. It's good for over a month. You know, dare I say even 2 months. So you can always add to it or add it to another dough and make a 2-crust pie. But anyhow, try this. Let me know what you think if you do. You know, or if you've got your own, share it with me. You can share it with us on the Facebook page, on the group page, Mr. Smith's Kitchen. It's group page. We're all the time putting recipes on there. You know, whether it be dinner or dessert or whatever. We share all kinds of recipes, and anything I run across that's interesting, you know, I'll throw it on there too. Or if you run across something that you find interesting, you can throw it on there also. But let me know down in the comments if you try this, or if you have a cherry pie crisp recipe of your own. And if you do try this, let me know if you like it. Let me know if you hate it. Let me know if you like, Brian, that was like the worst cherry pie I've ever had in my life. Okay, not everything's for everyone. You know, and I'm okay with that. Tell me why. Tell me what you didn't like about it. Tell me what you loved about it. Whichever. So anyhow, next week, I have no idea what we're going to do, as always. Other than, we are going to can some stuff. I got some tomatoes going gangbusters out in the garden that I'm going to need to get off the vines and into some jars. So we may make some rotel. Or if I have enough, we may make some sauce or salsa. Ooh, excuse me, salsa. It's hard to say either way, but we're going to get into something either way it goes. Whether it be processing something, dinner, definitely a dessert on Thursday. So until then, I love you. I love you very much. Tell somebody else you love them and love them very much. It's going to make their day a whole lot better, I guarantee it. Especially if you share some of this pie with them. Pie is the greatest ending to any rotten day. Or even a good day for that matter. Pie is always a good time. So, until next week, stay safe. I love you. Share this with a friend, and I'll see you then. All right?